For nearly 4 years, I worked in a residential care home where I, as part of a team, supported 5 residents who had both physical and mental disabilities. And on August 20th, 2018, almost exactly 2 years ago, I began what I fully expect will remain the hardest 2 weeks in my professional life ever. On August 20th, a date that is etched into my very heart, one of our residents suffered a massive, very unexpected heart attack and died. The truth is, the place where I worked never really recovered. The gentleman that died was the hub of the house. His absence was tangible. In all honesty, I'm not sure that I ever truly recovered. I have experienced a lot of death in my family, among my friends, among their families, among the church. But only one brought me to my knees in such great mourning until that day. That one time was my granny. I wrote about it at the time. I will leave a link in the description. Including my granny's case, I was prepared for all of the deaths. They were all hard and heartbreaking, but they were not surprises. Not a day goes by, still, where I do not think about him. Or the fact that I was working the day before he died. I never said goodbye to him that night, because I was busy at the time he went to bed. And less than 24 hours later, he was gone. The week leading up to the funeral was incredibly hard, but I gave a eulogy. In it, I talked about how big his personality was and how he was the centre of the house. I also talked about my family. You see, my granny passed away in 2013, but her husband, my granddad, passed away in 1994. I was too young to process the grief, too young to understand what was going on. All I knew is that my granddad was gone, and I didn't understand why. As a child, I tried to quantify it. I remembered that the Bible talks about Jesus going to prepare a place for us. This meant he needed people who were good with tools, which my granddad was. So I finally found comfort in the idea that God took my granddad to heaven because he needed him to help with the carpentry and building the house. It was this that I mentioned in my eulogy, because the gentleman that died loved to recycle. And so to me, that must have meant that God needed him to head up his recycling plans. On the outside, it seemed like I was coping, but on the inside, I was falling apart. I had tasks I needed to fulfill for my congregation, but couldn't, because my grief and pain were too powerful. I went to a youth weekend the weekend after he died. I needed support from Christians because I was really struggling. I had a conversation with my friend Neil, who asked me, "What have you learned?" And this is a question we should be asking ourselves in every situation we go through in our lives. What I mean is, we should be asking, what is God trying to teach me in this moment? I discussed it at length with Neil, and then again with my friends Jared and Scott, and my brother Adam, later that night. And I will come back to this question. But there's more to this story now. Fast forward to 2020, a year unlike any that anyone has ever known. Yet as far as I was concerned, January was one of the best Januaries I could remember. But, as everyone can attest, this did not last. On February 15th, 2020, another one of our residents took a sudden turn in his health. We got to see him in the hospital, but he never recovered consciousness and died that night. I wasn't able to go to his funeral. Not long after, the world went into lockdown. And on March 27th, my grandpa in Canada, my mum's dad, took a sudden turn in his health and was taken to hospital. On the morning of March 28th, my grandpa passed away. His grandchildren each wrote a memorial about him for a book we gave to our grandma, his wife. A link to what I wrote will be in the description. That was almost 5 months ago. And I don't think I've been able to really process my grief. There are moments where I crack. And that's okay. Because we all need a good cry now and then. Often I find solace in music, and ever since the first resident passed away in 2018, I have found comfort in a Casting Crowns song, Just Be Held. I won't play it for copyright reasons, though I can't imagine they'd mind too much. But I will read a streamlined version of the lyrics. Hold it all together. Everybody needs you strong. But life hits you out of nowhere and barely leaves you holding on. And when you're tired of fighting, chained by your control, there's freedom in surrender. Lay it down and let it go. If your eyes are on the storm, you'll wonder if I love you still. But if your eyes are on the cross, you'll know I always have, and I always will. And not a tear is wasted. In time, you'll understand. I'm painting beauty with the ashes. Your life is in my hands. Lift your hands, lift your eyes. In the storm is where you'll find me. And where you are, I'll hold your heart. Come to me, find your rest in the arms of the God who won't let go. So when you're on your knees and answers seem so far away, you're not alone. Stop holding on and just be held. Your world's not falling apart, it's falling into place. I'm on the throne. Stop holding on and just be held. Just be held. Just be held. Sometimes what you need to hear is something you already know. Come to me, all who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. The Lord is my rock and my fortress, and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield, and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. There isn't a day that doesn't go by where I don't think about the residents who passed away, or my grandparents. As such, this song is also in my mind a lot. There is something else that keeps replaying in my mind. What is God trying to teach me in this moment? The truth is, I could talk for hours and write pages upon pages about the things I have learned working with the men I supported. But I won't do that here. This video is already one of my longest. The one thing I want to talk about, though, through all my grief, I still have joy. You see, joy isn't the same thing as happiness, because your happiness is subjective. It can be affected by the smallest inconvenience. But joy transcends moments and can't be washed away by small or even gigantic inconveniences. It remains constant. I have joy because of faith, hope, and love. None of which could have been possible if Christ hadn't come to earth, been crucified, and raised from the dead. My friend Ian is a sign language interpreter for students at college. And at the youth weekend I mentioned earlier, he showed us the sign for crucifixion. It's a haunting image. But what if we looked at it another way? When someone stands, arms stretched out wide, as if on a cross, what does it look like? Christ stretched out his arms on the cross so he could invite every person into his family with open arms. I've been very lucky. All of my grandparents were Christians. If I stay the course, I fully expect to see them in heaven. But what about the two gentlemen? Will I see them again in heaven? I won't know for certain until I get there, but I believe that God is just, and that he understands a person's capacity better than we do. I believe that a person's capacity is linked to their innocence, and I am willing to discuss this with anyone. However, there are a couple things I know for certain. God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Thanks to his death on the cross, Jesus, with arms open wide, says, "My child, I know and I understand your grief. Come, leave your baggage with me. Let me hold you for a while. I will get you through this because I love you. Come to me and just be held."
Family of God and fellow heirs, we can be sure Jesus cares.